Hmm. Queen Bee, too. Hi, how are you? What a great name. Rachel, how are you? Mitzel Coach, hi, how are you? Uh, wow, oh, there's a lot. Always Sin Bloom, hi from Jerusalem. Oh, I am thinking of you. We're all thinking of you over there. Thank you for taking the time to join us here today. San Diego, Anna. Hi from San Diego. Jenna Brook Beauty. Hi, I like that name too. So many great names of people on Instagram. Mark Christoph, how are the children? They're grown adults. Hi. Oh, Dr. Shefali also already joined. My I'm going to talk a little bit about her beforehand, but I don't want to keep her waiting because she's on a book tour. Uh, and so there you are, my friend. There you are.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, are you kidding? You know you can always come on here. You know that I will do anything for you. How are we?
We're good. We're excited. Always with the birth of a new project, it's exciting.
Yes,
So I'm
it
very
is.
honored and humbled that people are buying my new book and sharing it. And so I'm just always in such a position of gratitude to you too.
Oh, well, listen, I'm so happy for you. Dr. Shivali has written this new book. It's called A Radical Awakening. Turn pain into power. Who doesn't want to do that? Embrace your truth. Easier said than done, but who doesn't want to do that? And live free. So let me ask you, Dr. Shivali, and we've spoken many times before. We're friends. I'm a big admirer of her work. You talked about birthing a new project, a book. It's scary, right? It's scary to birth a new book. You feel really, I can speak for myself. You feel scared. You feel vulnerable. You feel like there's that moment of like, is anybody going to like what I did, right?
Yeah, it is a setup for getting yourself into a labyrinth of insecurity.
Yeah.
And that's why I just was telling a friend that all day I've had to center myself into my why. Why did I write this book? And as long as can keep remembering the purpose that I connected to, then the approval from others fades a little bit.
Yes.
So this is why it's so important. We have to be so clear about our inner motivation when we start anything, a marriage, parenthood, a book, because other people will always have their right to their opinion. So are you going to be tethered to that constantly, or are you going to be anchored to your inner why, to your inner commitment?
So I love that. I think knowing why you do whatever it is you do is paramount, right? Having an intention about what you're doing. So why? Why this book? And you explained why in the beginning, but for those who haven't bought it yet, and it just came out, The Radical Awakening, what is your larger why? Because your book, The Conscious Parent, had a very specific why, right? You wanted to help people parent from a more conscious space and place. The Awakened Family, same thing, a specific why for our families, right? But the Awakened Woman, what was your why? Like, I have to write this. Why?
Because I began to see that this time is a pivotal time for us women. The Me Too movement catapulted an awareness within us that we were being silent for too long. And the Black Lives Movement showed us that those who are oppressed need to rise up together. The pandemic has really been hard for us women because we are holding all the different facets of everyone's happiness in our hands.
Mhm.
And I feel that there have been enough books out there about the importance of women's movements. But the reason why I feel my book has a particular why is because it paves the path for that radical awakening. It takes all the lessons we've learned through the Me Too, through the Black Lives Matter, through the pandemic, and it coalesces it all as a pathway for women to really walk step by step into their power.
And you
And
said that you say in the beginning of this book, this is not going to be a comfortable read. I'm going to push your buttons. It's going to be uncomfortable. But so you talked about your why. Why should people read it? Why should women who are inundated, right, with everything they have to do, stop, pause, and pick this up?
because I believe that each one of us has parts of ourselves that is lying to us, parts of ourselves that we have betrothed to others, to culture, and in a way are encaged by others and culture. Each woman, until she goes through a radical awakening, is tethered and has given her power away. So this book will allow that woman to reclaim those parts of her life where that power has been given, where she's more dependent on someone's approval, where she's waiting for permission from somebody on the outside, and take all that energy back within her, harness all that power back for her own self and reclaim her authority. I thought I was awakened until I radically awakened. And the reason why it's an uncomfortable read is because the radical part of the awakening process, according to me, is when we fully take accountability for our co-creation in our mental oppression. And in
Say more
any
about that. Say more about that. We take responsibility for our own creation, our own co-creation. What do you mean by that exactly?
that every mental or emotional experience we have, I'm not talking about physical enslavement, because sometimes, if I'm raped on a run in Central Park, I didn't co-create that moment. I co-create every other moment, but not that moment. So what I mean by co-creation is that for every mental and emotional experience we're having, we are bringing to it very unique dynamics from our childhood that are literally weaving the experience needle thread by thread. We don't see it because we're asleep to ourselves. We believe the other is doing it. We can see everyone else's needles because they poke us, but we don't see how our needle is interweaving with their needle to create the tapestry of our emotional experience. So that's the co-creation. So the
how do you suggest that people, if that they awake to that, they awake to their own role in that?
Yeah. Well, after enough pain in their life, this one left me, this one lied to me, this one betrayed me, my kid is not obedient or cooperative, with enough triggers, I hope that we come to the rock bottom moment. I talk about that in the book, where we realize that maybe I need to change and I need to look at how I am part of this life. How am I holding the wheels? Am I holding them too tight? Am I holding them too loose? Am I swerving left all the time when I should stay straight? We are doing deliberate things, albeit unconsciously, that literally co-create our emotional experience, and we are asleep to that. So the real radical awakening is realizing there's no one to blame, even though it's so delicious to blame. It's so lovely to blame, but there's no one to blame. And when we realize that, oh my goodness, this relationship, however dysfunctional, this job, however stagnant, has now shown me where I need to wake up, then the next decade of my life can be lived in a more awakened way.
So I'm looking at some of these comments, and I wanted to go back to this one woman's comment here. Awakened Photos by Jen. She was saying, this is so true. I'm just starting to realize how events in my childhood have created my adult path. And that's something that you write about in the opening chapter. Explain to people, just as best you can, Dr. Shefali, about how things in our childhood that we don't resolve, that we don't pay attention to, have a way of coming up in our adult relationships. I did not get awakened to this until later in my own life, trying to connect the parallels, but give people a chance to understand how to connect the dots.
Well, when we were young, we are innocent and we are are absorbent like sponges.
Mm.
And our unconscious parents give us their unmet fantasies, their expectations. And because our only agenda as children is to be seen and approved and validated, we become, we recruit ourselves into the roles that they need us to play so that we can get crumbs for love and worth. So somebody becomes the pleaser, somebody becomes the comedian, somebody becomes the overweight kid, somebody becomes a C-grade kid, somebody becomes the angry rebel. We don't realize that those are patterns that we're creating, a false self, to get the love and worth from our parents. Those are the patterns we then take into adulthood, and we keep playing those roles, but eventually they will turn to be sour and very dysfunctional because they were emerging from hunger, from lack, from scarcity. So that's what's underneath the role. So if you're the most talented musician, but the underneath foundation is lack and scarcity, that's going to be the dysfunction. Whether you're super successful on the outside or not, if your foundation is hunger, we keep recreating emotional relationships based on hunger.
Yeah, and
And
I
that,
think what you write in there is so important. If you have also an unresolved relationship with your parent, you bring that into an intimate relationship as an adult. You kind of duplicate that unresolved relationship. You duplicate the resentment. You duplicate scenes of abandonment until you wake up. And I think the exciting thing with all of this is that you're in the driver's seat. Once you're awakened, once you realize, okay, I don't have to be the victim, I can give up that role, I can take back the reins of power and direct my own life moving forward. That's an awakened life, correct?
that is the key to it. When you disrupt your patterns and realize that just before we're about to step into our pattern of the good girl or the good wife, just before that, there is freedom. And that's what this book teaches us, is to expand that moment just before we're unconscious so that we disrupt unhealthy patterns in our life and make healthy choices for ourselves, empowered choices.
Dr. Shefali has this great poem that she wrote in the beginning of the book that I loved. It's called The Time of the Awakened Woman. And it starts like this: there comes a time in the life of a woman when she discards her old ways like tossed shoes in the garbage, when she shreds her list of shoulds and obligations, and when impossible expectations are burned in the incinerator. And then he goes on, Stan, there comes a time in the life of a woman when the approval of others, once jewels, now turn to pennies in her sock, when the hunt for another is now replaced by the hunt for herself, and when parental tentacles of tradition no longer define her truth. So you're really, I mean, it goes on. I would like to read all of it because I thought it was so beautiful, and I'm going to put up part of it in the Sunday paper this Sunday. But the hunt for yourself, that seems to happen in midlife, really, the hunt for yourself. And you write about when you actually kind of begin the book, you write, the first line is, I knew I was in trouble when I found myself in a ditch on the side of the road with zero recollection of how I got there. There's always a moment, I think, in someone's life when they're like, I'm in trouble. Whatever it is, it's a car accident, it's a moment in your home, it's a moment in your relationship, in your work, where you're like, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
That moment for you, where you're like, I'm in trouble, that spurred your awakening?
Yeah, I was so exhausted that moment, and my car veered off course, but I realized my soul had veered off course. I became so exhausted and busy in my doing that even though all my doing was lovely, it had obliterated my sense of self. I couldn't breathe in my authentic self anymore. I was just breathing for everyone else. And in my doing, had forgotten how to be in the moment. And I realized I was on autopilot, and I was burning out. And I knew I needed to fully recalibrate my life. But it did take another 4 or 5 years for the full cycle to end. You know, people shouldn't think that this needs to happen in a moment and then it finishes in a moment. these are signs and signals that we can begin hearing. The inner knowings begin getting stirred within us that we pay attention to, and then we sit with it. We allow it to speak to us. We speak to a counselor, to a coach, to a therapist. We speak to our friends, and slowly allow for a new narrative to emerge in our consciousness.
Yeah, let me talk, because so many people I talk to, they may be in the beginning of this awakening. Something is stirring within them. They don't think they're in the right job. They might not be in the right marriage. And it does take, as you say, time to step into that more awakened place. But how would the person I would have been talking to before be different than the woman I'm talking to right now?
On the outside, I may look the same, but I think my inner freedom would show in my outer buoyancy. But I think on the inside, if you could look inside, you would have seen in the past a woman who was shy to take up her space, who was hesitant to speak her truth, who was afraid of the consequences of a conflict. And this woman today simply has none of those fears left, so it's an inner self that has unburdened itself from the legacies of other people's expectations, from the weight of other people's opinions. And I'm sure, how heavy those can be inside us. And when we shed those, we enter a new clarity within ourselves where we are no longer tethered to these impossible expectations for ourselves. We're grounded in a sense of worth that is okay being simple, being ordinary, being just average, and people get so afraid of the word average. And what I mean by that is just okay, just fine. Winnicott is this famous psychologist, and in psychology, he talked about the good enough mother.
Yeah.
And I took that away as a student because I see around us the resistance to the good enough. And I always ask my clients, if it's good enough, that is amazing. When did good enough stop being good enough? And we women in particular are plagued by the curse of this perfectionistic ideal of an impossible standard, that we've lost any idea of what is good enough. Now we want.
I think so many women and I, compare themselves, and obviously social media exacerbates that situation. But I think they may even look at you and you're putting out book after book after, seminars and this and that. And they're like, that's a human doing. That's not a being. She's, putting out books and, she's telling us how to parent, how to be in a family, how to be an awakened woman. There's this and that. Like, I can't compare with that. How is that being?
Right. So when the outer is aligned with the inner, it's a different flow. When the outer is disconnected from the inner, then we're going to be in trouble. Then we're doing for accolades. We're doing for trophies. And there was a time in my life, in my early 20s, that I did for accolades. I did for trophies. And like I said at the beginning, the way I keep myself centered is the alignment with the why. So even though I look like I'm doing, I make sure that my doing is really flowing from a deep well of purpose, of inner connection. So that's why I can keep going, because it's not work for me. It's just pouring out of me. So the first step is not to compare with how it looks on the outside, because somebody can garden all day, and that's as much an alignment as somebody who cooks all day. So people shouldn't get enamored by people who are on social media or celebrities.
I want to just interrupt you because these questions are coming in. This awakened photos by Jen. I think she has a really good question here. How do we learn to trust our inner voice, our inner awakening after abuse? I think that so many people, obviously experience abuse. They experience gaslighting. They don't trust their own awakening. They don't trust their own intuition. They don't trust their why.
I know, because the person we were before we entered that abusive relationship was already lost to the self. I said in this book that we don't enter a relationship and then get lost. We entered the relationship lost. And then that dysfunctional relationship abducts us. So after abuse, we have to now go back and heal. It's true that we don't trust ourselves after an abusive relationship, because that relationship has helped massacre an already decimated sense of self, right? We were already this small and that relationship just squashed us. So it takes time to heal. You have to give yourself the solitude and the space to listen and honor and have your own back and take your power back from that perpetrator and learn to nurture yourself. It is an odyssey of self-love that you have to go on, especially after an abusive relationship.
That's a beautiful answer. People talking about, and I think that circles back to what Dr. Shefali was talking about, is understanding the false self that might have been created in childhood, and how until we resolve some of those situations, we replay them out in adulthood, be they in our marriages, our relationships, our work situations, and that that we're capable, once awakened, to step back and heal, and then build up our confidence in our own intuition, like that you're in our gut. And whether, and then there's going to say the same, somebody's saying here about trauma. The questions go so fast. Divorce for love. I was going to say the same, healing, that trauma first came and you get your power back. I think that's really important thing. And that's really what I think you're saying with this beautiful book. I love that you say it doesn't have to happen in a second, that it can take you a while. I think we all, come down hard on ourselves. Like, I know this is wrong. I should be out, but I can't figure it out. And it's to go slow, to be kind to yourself, and to, once you begin to awaken, there's no going back, right?
Yeah, you can't, once you awaken, you simply can't go back. But that's also traumatic, because you're leaving a whole way of life behind you. And sometimes the people who were in that old dynamic don't want to come with you on your new journey. So you have to honor that grief, release it, and honor yourself enough to know that you'll be okay on your new path. Other people will come and new opportunities will come, because people feel nervous and alone, that they're leaving a lot of people in that unconscious state behind. But that's part of the process. To evolve into the new, we must leave the old. And that's tricky for people sometimes.
That's where you find how brave you actually are. And I intrinsically believe that we're all way braver than we give ourselves credit for. And that you just have to keep reminding yourself, if you're on the path towards awakening, you will be okay, because you're already brave to realize that. What is your hope, Dr. Shefali, for people who read this book, be they women on the path, be they others who love women, who might be going on a path that someone doesn't understand? I think this is a good book for anybody to read, whether they're seeking awakening or in partnership with someone who is awakening.
I think my greatest desire would be for women to realize their sovereign courage, their absolute destiny to be authentic, and that in this incarnation, they don't need to wait for permission anymore, and the time is now, and that they have it within them. They just haven't accessed it because of their own inner block. And if they could just dissolve the inner blocks, which this book teaches them to do, they will have their greatest empowerment right within them available.
You said dissolve their inner blocks, which this book teaches them to do. That is some really tough work, dissolving your inner blocks. What's the biggest inner block towards that most people have, that keeps them from achieving freedom, that keeps them from achieving the life that they really want?
I call it the pill that kills. And it is our belief, our misbelief, that we are unworthy. We have believed as a culture, especially us women, that we are intrinsically unworthy of our truth, unworthy of our knowing, unworthy of space, unworthy of being alone. And this block is the biggest block that keeps us from living a liberated life.
So you're saying that the idea that kind of fundamentally deep within, we feel we're unworthy of that partner, unworthy of that job, unworthy of that truth.
Unworthy of all those things, unworthy to leave an abusive relationship, unworthy to get into enlightened partnerships, unworthy to find our truest self. We're always stepping away from it, because our true power, because somewhere deep down, long time ago, we signed a contract that said, I am unworthy, and we are beholden to that contract. That's the contract we have to really break in our life.
Do you think that we're seeing this on a kind of a collective national kind of level, that everybody feels somewhat traumatized, somewhat, and they're awakening in a way coming out of this pandemic to a new reality, and they're really unsure of how to navigate it?
I think so. That's why this book is, in a way, very serendipitous, because there's been so much pain. And that's why I talk about pain is the portal. When there's so much global pain and we're forced to sit at home like we were, we have to confront the self. You know, this has been such a portal, and I think it's caused unrest. It's caused PTSD, because we are now in the birthing canal. We don't know how we're going to emerge. Are we going to go back, or are we going to go forward? But this is the opportunity now to truly break free from the dysfunctional patterns, because we were not healthy before, and truly now rebirth into a new state of health and well-being.
That is so beautiful. So I want everybody, if they can, to take a look at it's called A Radical Awakening, Turn Pain into Power. Just think of pain as the portal. I think, as Dr. Shefali said, I love kind of the analogies, the alliteration of that. Pain is not, we're all afraid of pain, right? But pain is a portal, you know, birthing yourself through the pain portal into awakening. That's such a beautiful thing. But embrace your truth, whatever it is. You know, it's not, whatever your truth is, it can't be that bad, right? Because everybody's truth is messy, right? And then live free. And that's on the other side of pain, you're saying, is the gift of the portal of pain to awakening is freedom, right?
Yes, because in that portal, you're shedding all the tethers to all the lies we've been told and all our beliefs about our unworthiness. So in that portal, you shed that and you emerge lighter and more liberated.
Dr. Shefali, I know you're like everywhere, and I know you're back-to-back interviews and stuff. So I want to thank you for coming on here. We're going to post the poem in the Sunday paper. We posted an excerpt from the book last Sunday, and we'll also hook into this conversation again. So I wish you so much luck with this. I love your why. It's to help us all awaken and meet each other in what I call the open field, a place out beyond expectation, shame, guilt, fear. We'll meet you there, no questions asked. So I think that that's a beautiful thing. But in order to get there, we have to be brave enough to go through the portal of pain. And having done that myself, I'm here to tell you it's painful, but the not doing it is even more painful. And
Yes. Maria, thank you for having me and always supporting my work. I'm humbled and indebted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shefali. God bless you, and good luck with the book. And thank you for once again teaching us, guiding us forward into our own awakening. I love that. A radical awakening. It isn't going to be comfortable, but it's going to be good on the other side.
It is. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
That is it. A Radical Awakening. She has a lot of great blurbs on the back. Eckhart Tolle, Alicia Keys, Marie Forleo, Gabor Mate. So there's a lot of good blurbs here. There's a lot of good work in here. And what I think is always the great takeaway is that you yourself have the power to redirect your life however you choose. And when you redirect your life, when you heal your life, that's the best way to heal the world. Because if you go out into the world with care, with compassion, with love for yourself, you already have it for others. It just works that way. And when we put love out into the world, that's the biggest single transformation for the world. So I hope all of you will, the book, what's the book called? It's called A Radical Awakening by Dr. Shefali. She obviously has other good books as well. If you're not on the Sunday paper email list, I hope you will subscribe to the Sunday paper. The link is in my bio. Every week we come to your inbox with insight, information, and inspiration. Do not start your week without the Sunday paper. And we have voices like Dr. Shivali in there every week, helping guide you out into the open field and to your best version of you. So thank you so much for joining us. God bless you. Happy midweek. Happy hump day. See ya.